Hello there! Today I am talking about The Troop by Nick Cutter. Now this book is a gross horror book. Welcome, my name is Leah. This is my channel, Dirty Little Literate, where I like to talk about books that are weird, gross, disturbing, disgusting, etc., what have you. So like I said, weird, gross horror book. So this one was pretty good. I can't say that I loved it. I liked it. I liked it okay. So this one is about a group of 14-year-old Boy Scouts who go to this remote island with their Scoutmaster, and it is going to be just the 6 of them. Yes, the Scoutmaster and 5 boys are going to this island for a couple days. There's nobody else on the island. So let me tell you a little bit about these boys. So there are 5 boys. We have Mutant, who is this overweight boy that gets made fun of by everyone. All of the other boys are super mean to him. He's super, super smart. He's super responsible and all of the good qualities that, other teenage boys do not respect. We have Kent, who is the son of the police chief, and he thinks he's hot shit, and he thinks he could beat up anybody or do anything. Everybody listen to him because he's in charge. We have Ephraim, who is a big boy who's got some anger issues, so if you piss him off, he's gonna punch you in the face. We have his best friend, Max, who, honestly, Max's personality doesn't stand out to me too much one way or the other. There's no cliche or stereotype that he quite fits into. He's just a normal ass 14-year-old boy who happens to be friends with the one who will punch you in the face. And then we have Shelly, and Shelly is an absolute psychopath. We don't like Shelly. Shelly is terrifying. Shelly wants to do horrible things to everyone, but he stays under the radar pretending to be dumb, and nobody thinks he ever knows what's going on, but he's actually quite calculating and manipulative and is just waiting for you to not suspect him to do something horrible to you, to do something horrible to an animal. I will warn you, a lot of horrible things happen to animals in this book. It was very disappointing, and I was already so far in, so I decided to finish it, but honestly I don't think I would recommend powering through any of the animal cruelty parts if that's something that's hard for you like it is for me, just for the sake of reading this book, because it wasn't that amazing. We have Scoutmaster Tim, who, he's not that cool, but the boys have known him almost their whole lives. They generally respect him because he's been a consistent figure for them, and he's a nice guy. He's also a medical doctor. So one day, while the boys and the Scoutmaster are on the island, there is an emaciated man who comes to the island by boat, and the boys are asleep. The Scoutmaster is the one who is aware of this man, and he becomes aware of him because this man is not doing so hot. He's trying to eat everything in sight. He's complaining about how hungry he is. He's eating everything under the sun. It does not need to be edible for him to eat it, but he looks like there is barely anything left to him, and he looks unwell in a way that the Scoutmaster has never seen before, despite being a doctor. And so he's thinking, he's gotta adhere to the oath he took, and he needs to help this man. Just a little side note, the Scoutmaster do be drinking when the boys aren't paying attention, and that's kind of sketchy because he's the only adult on this island with the boys, and so, he's drinking and being like, "Let me help you out, sir." And this man just, it's like you don't even want to touch him. Everything about him just looks gross and fucked up. It's not just that he's skinny, he just looks so severely unwell. So this is fucked up, but the man, at a certain point, it becomes clear that he's gonna die. He's that ill, and the doctor, who is apparently not really a great surgeon, he's more just a general practice, small town doc, he decides that he needs to try to save this man, but he doesn't know what's wrong with him. So in his mind, he's like, you know what? I gotta cut him open and dig around in there and let's find out what's happening, which, okay. So this seems like a kind of crazy thing to jump to. Let me just cut open this dude, even though I've been drinking, even though I don't really know how to do surgery that well. And, this isn't a sterile environment, etc., etc. But the reason he has to is because he doesn't really have any other options, because this emaciated man broke his radio once he got there, and it wasn't clear why, but it seemed okay, maybe does he not want anyone to know that he is on this island? So our mildly unhinged doctor slash scoutmaster decides that he is going to cut this man open, and he makes the very sound decision of recruiting one of the 14-year-old boys to assist with the surgery. So Max's dad is the county coroner. So Max has seen his fair share of dead bodies and his dad doing kind of gross stuff to dead bodies. So the scoutmaster decides, okay, he's my best bet and I can't do this alone. And he's trying to justify to himself, like, yeah, it's fine that I'm letting this kid do this, which no, not really. And he tells all the other boys that they need to stay in their cabin. And during the surgery, shit starts to go awry. He cuts the man's stomach open. Once he cuts open this man's stomach, they find something horrible. There is a giant white tube-looking object that starts moving and pulsating and coming out of his stomach. And it starts branching out, and all these appendages start coming off of this tube. And it almost looks like they're trying to come at, the scoutmaster and Max, and wants to touch him. And the man wakes up. So the scoutmaster didn't really have proper anesthesia. He had some mild painkillers, but the man was in such bad shape that it wasn't really hard to knock him out. And now the man wakes up while his stomach is cut open and sees this crazy tubey white blobby thing coming out of him, and he's absolutely fucking horrified, of course. And so this object, it appears to be like a giant worm, a tapeworm, like a monstrous giant laboratory made tapeworm. And we are getting different little ditties throughout the book. In between chapters, there will be these medical reports or news reports or whatever. There's a lot of different stuff that indicates that this island had to be quarantined by the military. No one was being let in. No one was allowed to go out because there's something horrible on the island. And that horrible thing is what is living in this man. So if you were wondering if this crazy wormy thing is super effing contagious, you would be correct. And after this man wakes up with the worm thing and he's like dying, the worm actually it goes and it wraps around his throat and chokes him, the emaciated man. So the dying man is finally officially killed by his own tapeworm by being strangled by a tapeworm. What? Crazy. So in addition to the little asides that we have that are just a couple pages of like information about what's happening with the military and this island and things like that, we also get these lab reports, and these are from the lab of the scientist who created this mega scary tapeworm. And it is really sad because obviously he tested this on animals. So there will at first be like, I think, hamsters. Eventually he graduates to gorillas, and they'll infect the creature with the tapeworm, and for a while it's unchanged. But within 24 hours, like the progression of what happens with this tapeworm is so crazy. It becomes so rapid. So like in 24 hours you could lose practically almost half of your body weight, and you'll start like ripping out your hair. So the animals are ripping out their fur. They'll start eating their own body, basically. Like, it is just the most horrible things that could happen to a body are what is happening to these animals that are having this tested on them. So it's quite unpleasant. Very unfortunate, but we find out that the emaciated man, at one point, I think he had kind of spit on Tim, the scoutmaster, and the scoutmaster is not doing so hot. He's not feeling super well, and he is feeling very, very hungry. And unfortunately, that is the sign that perhaps you have been infected by this, because you are wanting to eat inanimate objects. You will eat literally anything, and you have this all-consuming desire to consume everything. So this is super crazy and kind of fucked up, but the boys are losing all respect for their scoutmaster. They think it was crazy that he asked one of the boys to help with the surgery. Like, he just seems like he's becoming a bit undone, and they're like, fuck it, we don't trust you. Why aren't you letting us know what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And so they end up overpowering him because it's 5-on-1, and they push him into this supply closet and lock him in. And so he is trapped in there. They don't want to get infected with anything, and it's clear that he's sick. And so it's okay, this part is so ridiculous, but like, they make a big scene of the fact that like, when the boys are overpowering him and like pushing him down, like, it's already such an embarrassing thing for him that like, these boys he's known forever, like, they've lost respect for him. They're taking over, and he falls and he farts. And like, I just thought, like, okay, the fact that the author felt like that really needed to happen right now, and he really like hyped it up, like, then a very unfortunate thing happened. The scoutmaster farted, and like, I don't know, really hyped it up. But anyway, so he is locked in there, and now it's kind of just the boys doing their own thing and trying to figure out what they should do, because obviously they can't use the radio. There is a plan. I believe on the 3rd day, there is supposed to be a boat that is scheduled to come and pick them up. So they're thinking, okay, I guess we just need to deal with this. Until then, there's the one boy, Kent, who is the police chief's son, and he is the one who's taken charge and wants everyone to follow his lead. The next morning, the boys find that one of their containers with all of their food is gone. There's no food left for them, and they don't know what happened. At first, they're thinking that maybe animals got into it. They're thinking if it was one of them, they would have woken up and heard. I don't know. So we find out that the boy in charge, Kent, apparently he had taken a sip of alcohol from the Scoutmaster's supply, and it was an open bottle, and it was an open bottle that the Scoutmaster had already been drinking from. So it has his germs all over it, which means it has his little tapewormy gooiness all over it, and Kent has now consumed that, and lo and behold, we find that Kent is the one who made off with all the food during the night, because we now have our first boy who is infected. And then, what luck, we have a cyclone coming in. It's very clear that there's a storm brewing, and the boys know it's coming. They know that they need to take cover. They check in with the Scoutmaster through the door, and he is very clearly not seeming himself, not doing well, and I think he knows that he's gonna die, and so he's like, boys, you just need to go and get down into the cellar and take cover. And the boys at this point now have been able to tell that Kent is sick. He has already started losing a ton of weight. He looks like shit. And so they will not let him down into the cellar with them. So they're like, you can go hang out in the cabin, that's chill, but fuck you, not coming in here with us. So, you know, the group just keeps dividing more and more. So as the boys are, you know, preparing to deal with the cyclone, we're continuing to get little excerpts of court testimony. Like, some people got in trouble for these wormy worms. We are also getting some information about the origin of these worms. And one of the people being interviewed in court is a person who did help create the worms, but it sounds like he was under the impression that these worms were being created for a weight loss supplement, and that everything got way out of hand, and that it wasn't meant to turn out how it did. And as we will come to find out, that may have been what the cover story was, but this was definitely being created for some darker purposes. After the storm is over, the boys go to check on Scoutmaster Tim, and he is clearly not okay, because a tree has fallen and crushed his skull, and out of his stomach comes a bajillion different worms, and it's, yeah, just very unpleasant scene. So we have our first death of our group of 6, so other than the emaciated man. So, you know, this whole story, it's not like anything's gonna get better. Like, this is just gonna get more and more bleak, you know, as to be expected. At one point, the boys become very hopeful because they see that a boat is on its way and it looks like it's coming to their rescue. And they see 2 people on the boat waving their arms, trying to get their attention, when suddenly there is an explosion and the boat sinks. We end up getting a news report that shows us that there were 2 men who were arrested for breaching the military's boundaries around this quarantined island, and it was 2 of the boys' dads. 2 of the boys on the islands, their dads were trying to come and rescue them, and the military shot that shit down. And so these men are still alive, but it does sound like the military done, you know, fucked them up a little bit. Like, don't you be messing with the military. So no rescue at this time. So after the storm, the boys move Kent from the cabin down into the cellar, and he is just getting progressively worse and worse and looking more and more fucked up. And while the boys are out exploring, trying to see if they can find any food, like berries, anything like that, our one little psychopath boy, Shelly, he decides to hang back, and the other boys don't realize it, but he's gonna go and he's gonna fuck with Kent. Because, you know, he's a sadist and that's the jam. And so he goes into the cellar. He's like, well, you know why you're down here, right? Because it was Kent's idea to lock up Scoutmaster Tim in the closet. And so now Scoutmaster Tim is dead because of that. And so that's also why they felt hella justified in locking up Kent, because it's like, you were okay with doing that to Tim, so let's do that to you. And Kent is just begging for food. He is so starving. And Shelly is just like, yep, your fault. He's dead. Oh, here, you can eat a dragonfly corpse. He's just feeding him all these bugs, and Kent is eating them ravenously. At one point, when the boys had been arguing about what to do with Kent, one of the boys, Ephraim, he had actually punched Kent, because Kent is normally used to getting everything he wants, and normally he's kind of, you know, in charge. And so they'd gotten in a little tizzy, and Ephraim had punched him, because Ephraim is the one who will punch you. And as he did, it split his knuckles open. And because Kent is infected and now your knuckles are split open, there's certainly a possibility that now you're all wormy too. Now, Shelly, our little psychopath, he is super hyped to freak out Ephraim, and he tries to make it seem like, oh my God, I saw something wiggling. Saw something in your knuckles. I see something moving around in there. And he did not, but he is trying to psychologically torture him. So Ephraim is freaking out. He really believes that he has now been infected with the worms, even though he's not hungry. He just is so, you know, so easily manipulated by Shelly. And Shelly's like, you did see it, didn't you? Oh my God, you saw it, right? And so he's freaking out. And so Shelly, okay, I think at this point, Ephraim, especially given the circumstances of everything that's going on this island, this is a very traumatic situation. So it's clear that Ephraim is losing his grip, and I think he's having a bit of a mental break, and Shelly is totally indulging that. And so he is saying like, well, you know, I can help you. I think that there's a way to get it out. And this is so bad. So Shelly starts whispering to him these sweet, violent nothings, in which he convinces Ephraim to take his knife, because, you know, 14-year-old boys be having pocket knives, and he convinces him to try to use it to cut the worm out of his body. He begins by shoving the tip of his knife into his ear and twisting it around. Blah. But that's not enough, you know, we don't know where the worm is. We got to get all of it. He ends up taking this knife and cutting into his body in so many places, and everything he sees, often that will maybe be like a nerve, he's viewing it as a wiggly, squiggly worm, and he's probably going to like kill himself just from all, like, you know, the blood loss and all the damage he's doing to his body and potential infection, just hoping that he's going to be able to find the worm and pull it out. But to me, this also doesn't make sense, because like these worms multiply so easily. So just because you get one, are you really going to feel confident that you got them all? No, of course you're not. And I do just want to give a quick little aside here, personal note, why I can totally relate to, like, I shouldn't be able to relate to this story at all. I have an experience that, you know, allows me to understand how he fully believes that he has worms. Once upon a time, I felt something crazy in my throat and I kept trying to cough it up. It felt like there was something moving in my throat. I coughed it up. For sure looked like a worm. For fucking sure. I was absolutely horrified. I took it in a baggie to the doctor, asking the doc, like, is this a worm? What the fuck's going on? Because I Googled it. There is something called giant throat roundworm, and that shit will crawl up your throat. And my doctor's like, well, you know, it really looks like a worm. It's hard to think that it would be anything other than a worm. Got the test results, and the whole time I'm like, I can still feel part of it moving in my throat. It was phlegm. They told me it was phlegm. The results said it's phlegm. You do not have giant throat roundworm. But psychologically, for days, I 100% believed I had a worm in my throat. So while I did not decide to slit my own throat trying to get out my giant throat roundworm, you know, I understand the psychological motivation to do so. Crazy. Okay, so back to the story. So Max and Newton. So Max is the one that had to help with the surgery. And then we have Newton, who's the little chubby brainiac that everyone's super mean to. They are deciding to go and explore for food because Ephraim, you know, he didn't want to go with them because he's like, I have worms. And they didn't know that leaving him behind meant that Shelley was going to convince him to cut himself all up. So Max and Newton go to the beach and they see a very, very large turtle and they're thinking, oh my gosh, maybe we can eat it. And their hunger is the normal type of hungry, like, hey, we've been on an island for a couple days and we don't have food, not like we're wormy hungry, nothing like that. So this part was my absolute least favorite part of the story. They decide to kill the turtle, and it's sad because these boys are not boys who just like want to be violent or want to hurt things. They're not like Shelley. They're fucking hungry. They're trying to survive. But this turtle will not die. It is the slowest, most agonizing, horrible, violent death for this turtle. And the boys are so traumatized. By the time the turtle finally dies, they can't eat it. They're like, that was the worst thing that we have ever seen. They feel absolutely horrible, which honestly, it made me feel better that they felt so horrible about it. Like, someone who does that and doesn't care, like, that's, ugh, yeah. But I mean, no, it was an absolutely horrible part. While the boys are away, Shelley decides he's going to move on from Ephraim and he is going to go back to Kent. And he's like, you know what? Let me just kill Kent real quick, BRB. And he grabs Kent. And what's so interesting is apparently when you have this worm, you at a certain point start thinking you're invincible, you think you're getting super strong, you think you're a bad fucking bitch and can take on anyone. So Kent thinks he's undergone this like magical transformation, metamorphosis, and now he's this beautiful creature that everyone will be in awe of. Meanwhile, he looks like actual fucking death. Like, he looks more disgusting and dying and blah than anyone has ever looked. And Shelley just grabs him and drowns him, and it's super easy because he's super weak because he has not undergone a beautiful metamorphosis. So Shelley drowns Kent. Kent dies. Ugh. After drowning Kent, while he's still in the ocean, Shelley doesn't realize, so like he's holding Kent's like head, but like his head is like falling apart. It's all mush and bleh because, you know, his body was just like practically disintegrating anyway. And Shelley's just getting off on the whole situation. He's so into this. And at this point, one of the worms comes out of Kent's body and goes into Shelley's pee hole. It goes into his urethra. Boom, Shelley has the worms as well. At this point, Max and Newton decide to go back to camp, and this is when they find Ephraim. He's still alive, but he is in horrible shape. His body is all cut up, and he's still able to speak, though he is very much not doing well. And he's like, it's still inside me, it's still inside me. And they feel so bad because they know, like, you know, they've seen how the other boys look when they get sick. They know what it looks like. They know that he doesn't have this, but they understand that psychologically he's lost his shit and that he believes he does. This is the guy that will punch you in the face if you look at him funny, so they can't even be like, no, you don't have it, because he'll just punch them in the face and he won't believe them anyway. So they're like, oh gosh, we know that we need to get him help. They go to check on Kent. They see that he's missing. So everything is chaotic. They're hoping that maybe Kent, because he was like the leader of the pack, they're like, maybe he swam to shore, as if there was any way that was possible. So this is just becoming a more and more hopeless situation. So we do find out in some court testimony that the man who was helping our evil scientist create this whole worm situation, he was a worm knowledgeable kind of guy, but he was not like the brains behind the operation. He really did believe that they were just doing this like weight loss supplement. He is presented with some evidence that shows that the evil scientist was being paid millions of dollars by the military for the experimentation that supposedly they were also doing for this weight loss supplement. And so it was clear that this was actually being created, you know, to potentially use by the military, which is absolutely horrible. So probably not just to help you lose weight, although that would be a great moneymaker as well. And okay, going back to the boys, at one point, so after they see that Kent is no longer there, Max and Newton start hearing some intense screaming. So after killing Kent, Shelley goes back to Ephraim to see how his handiwork is. How is he doing after he's cutting himself all up thanks to Shelley's influence? And turns out not so hot. He's still worried. The worm is still in there. And so he's like, Shelley, you gotta help me. How do I get it out? And Shelley's like, I got you, bro. Let me just fucking scalp you. So he's just being like, okay, yeah, no, let me look. I'll see if I can find it and I'll cut it out. But no, he literally starts cutting off Ephraim's scalp, and Ephraim is like, thank you so much. So he's obviously so lost it, and yet they cannot seem to get the worm out via scalping. So he's like, bro, Ephraim, I think we need to burn this motherfucker out. So let me just fucking set you on fire. He sets Ephraim on fire, and Newton and Max hear the screaming of Ephraim on fire, and once they find him, they see Shelley and they see that Ephraim is burned and deceased. They know that Shelley has something to do with him being caught on fire. All the boys knew that something seemed hella off with Shelley. He, you know, he seems like a psychopath, and so they just believe that he had something to do with this, so they start being like, what have you done? What have you done? So while they're accusing Shelley of having done something to Ephraim, Ephraim was Max's best friend, so Max is absolutely destroyed, and so he's really coming at Shelley, and what do you know, as he comes at Shelley, Shelley stabs him in the gut with his knife, and then Newton, our little sweet baby Newton, he comes and he hits Shelley over the head with a piece of wood, and so yes, Newton hits Shelley on the head. Shelley falls down, he goes boom, he limps off into the forest. But yeah, Newton was like, okay, he was gonna kill Max, I had to defend him, I'm protecting the homie. So Shelley goes off into the woods, but later that night he does come back. It looks like he's gonna be trying to attack Newton and Max, but Newton like stayed awake. He stayed awake with a knife. He's like ready for Shelley. So Shelley sees that he can't really fuck with him, so he leaves. But Shelley's looking scary. Shelley's looking like a monster. He's transforming into this little wormy guy. And he keeps saying like he can't wait to be a daddy because he's like thinking of his worms as like his little babies. Can't wait to take care of his little babies. Kind of gnarly. And meanwhile, we get some additional court testimony, and this is the person who was in charge of the military who are quarantining the island, and he's the one who's giving the orders about how they're handling this quarantine situation. He's definitely getting grilled by a lawyer about the fact that they were just going to let these children suffer and potentially die on this island without saving them. And as more and more information comes out, we find out that there's an overlap between the person who's in charge of this quarantine and then some people who knew this scientist who was creating the worm. So it seems like potentially the military who are quarantining this island are also interested in the effects of the worm and have something to do with that. And so maybe they're curious to see how these worms are affecting the boys and like are just watching and standing by because they want this data. And so it's like super fucked up and super sad. And all the adults are not taking care of these children. At one point, Max and Newton have a really great idea about how to potentially escape from the island. So the boat that the emaciated man came in on, it appears that he had taken the spark plugs off of the boat because he didn't want anyone to be able to either leave the island, or he himself didn't want to be able to leave the island, but nobody knows where the spark plugs are. Except Max, now that he's thinking about it, has a little flashback, and he's remembering that when Scoutmaster Tim and him were doing the little surgery on the emaciated man, he had seen the spark plugs in the man's gut. I don't think he like put two and two together, like what they were at the time. He just thought they were like random objects, but then he's like, oh shit, that's what that was, because the man ate the spark plugs, because you will eat anything when you got this wormy thing going on. So like, okay, we gotta go back. We gotta go to the man's wormy body. We need to cut him open, and we need to get the spark plugs, and then we can put them on the boat, and then we can leave. And they do that successfully. They definitely make sure to, gear up so they're not getting the wormy juices all over them. So the spark plugs are quite damp, and they need to dry out in order for them to work. So they put the spark plugs on a rock on the shore, and they know exactly where they put them. And they're like, okay, we're going to let them dry out. They go and do other things, and when they come back, of course the spark plugs are gone, and of course Shelly probably took them. At first they're like fighting with each other, like, where'd you leave them? No, I told you not to leave them there. No, I told you not to leave them there. And they get in a little fight, and then they're like, wait, what are we doing? What the hell? No, Shelly definitely took them. So they need to go and find Shelly, and they are going to track him based on his smell, because once people get infected with these worms, they get this really sick, sweet smell to them. So they are going to follow the smell, and they end up finding Shelly in a cave, and Shelly looks absolutely disgusting. And honestly, I don't think I can do an effective job of like describing what he looks like based on the amount of description in this book and just how horrifying his body looks. Like, I know I said this is a gross book, and it really is, but nothing I'm gonna say is like gonna fully convince you. You have to really read the author's descriptions, because it is really, truly just so gnarly. But they do see that Shelly does have the spark plugs. You know what, actually, just let me read you just a couple like different sentences, just them describing Shelly right now. So his bones are like wrapped in like skin colored Christmas paper. They're referring to Shelly as it, because they're calling it like the Shelly thing, because he no longer seems human at this point. So they say its left eye was completely white. Something had sucked the pigment out of the eyeball the way a child sucks the red stripes off a peppermint candy. Its right eye was as shriveled as a dehydrated pea. White threads licked and lashed in the wide raw socket, making a wish sound. Oh, Max noticed clearly in its nakedness that its stomach was an obscenely pendulous appendage. The size of a beach ball, it swayed between its legs with a quivering, expectant weight. Its ribcage jutted in monstrous fingers. Huge knobs of flesh seeped filth all over its shoulders. A belt of ulcerated boils encircled its hips. Its lips hung down like the lips of an old horse. Its teeth were gone. Its gums hung in whitish rags from the roof of its mouth like the pith inside a pumpkin. It had nibbled its own skin off the tips of its fingers. Just all these different things. I just need you to know he's just gross, and it's going to continue on like that. The author's not going to spare you any detail about how disturbing this boy be looking right now. But Shelly had been laying in wait for Max and Newton, and so as they are approaching him, trying to get the spark plugs near him while they thought he was sleeping, he's ready for him. He comes at them. He's coming at Newton, and he's about to like be grappling with Newton, when all of a sudden he basically explodes. Like his whole abdomen that was all like beach ball-y, it explodes. And what do they say? He says, when the Shelly thing's stomach ruptured, it did so with a moist, ripping tear. Newton's thighs and abdomen were washed in a warm broth of desiccated organs and shrunken intestines and untold multitudes of writhing alabaster. So he's getting coated with all the wormy goo, and Shelly is now deceased. In all the chaos of Shelly exploding in an explosion of a multitude of worms that are getting all over him, they did not get the spark plugs. And, Newton is really the one that got covered. Max was fine, but they had run away, and Newton tried to wash off in the ocean, but he can tell that something got in him. He knows that he's infected now, and he was like our little sweetheart. We really liked him, so this is really sad. Max decides that, okay, taking one for the team, I'm gonna go back and get the spark plugs now that Shelly is dead, even though you don't really know what's going on in there. I feel like the worms are still maybe crawling around, I don't know. But he is actually successful when he goes back into the cave, and it's like pitch black. It sounds super scary and horrible, and he does get the spark plugs, and then he comes back to Newton, and he's hoping like, hey, you know, we're gonna be able to go. And Newton's like, hey, I feel something crawling around in my eye. And Max is like, no. But then Max looks at his eye and he sees something squiggling around in his eyeball. And so Max is, at this point, the only one left alive who is not infected with the worms. So as Max is wanting them to prepare to leave the island in the boat, Newton is saying, like, I just think you should go without me, because he knows he's infected, and he's like, if you boat off towards the military with me in the boat with you, obviously we know, like, they were smart enough to pick up on the fact that, like, they see, like, helicopters, they see boats, like, they know that the military is doing something, and so they know that, like, clearly there's this contagion that they're not wanting to get out. And they saw what happened to the boat of people who tried to come to the island. Like, you know, it got shot down. So they're thinking that if they go and they see that Newton's sick, they might just kill them both. And so Newton's trying to be like, no, you just need to go without me. But Max is not having that. He's like, no, we can just kind of ride far apart from each other in the boat. You won't infect me and we'll get help. So our boys ride off on their boat, and at one point, it's clear that Newton is becoming more and more unhinged. At one point, he stands up and he goes, I'm just so hungry. And then he falls off the boat because the military shoot him down. They shoot this poor hungry child. We find out later that apparently one of the military's trigger words where they were instructed to shoot if you hear one of these words was hungry, which is kind of crazy because these boys have been stranded on the island for days without food. So of course, all of them are hungry. So it's also very possible that they could have shot one of them for just being normal hungry and not wormy hungry. But in this case, Newton was infected. They kill Newton, but it's clear that Max seems like maybe he's chilling. So Max seems okay. Like, it doesn't look like there's anything apparently wrong with him. He's not using any of the trigger words. So they do not kill Max, although they are certainly exercising an abundance of caution. So the end of the book is basically, I believe it's a reporter who has gone to visit Max in his current situation. He is in this medical facility that is meant to contain people who are infected with horrible things. And the thing is, he doesn't have the worms, but because this is, you know, an unknown kind of contagion, like, they don't know everything about it. What if it develops years down the road? Like, they don't want to take any chances because this is something that could kill literally everyone in the world. And so Max he's kind of like a bubble boy. He has to live in a bubble. They have to give him like new paper clothes every single day. He looks like he's aged 9,000 years from all the trauma that he has been through. All his friends are dead. And after quite a long time, so they're routinely doing all this blood work, testing all this stuff to make sure that he doesn't have worms. But after a very, very, very long time of, you know, no symptoms, anything like that, he is allowed to be released back into the world. But everyone is so terrified of him and terrified that he still might have something and might spread it to them. Like, he's not allowed to go back to school. Like, he does school from home, like online, and like, his teachers didn't even want him to like hand in papers. Like, he has to email all his assignments. He notices that his mom now only kisses him on the forehead instead of the mouth. So this poor boy has gone through unspeakable tragedy, and now he is a pariah and cannot live a normal life. You feel very bad for him. We find out that one day he sneaks out and takes his uncle's boat and boats to the island, and it has been burned down. Like, it's just a bunch of like charred remains. But as he is driving the boat to the island, we get to read these sentences. A nameless hunger was building inside of him. It gnawed at his guts with teeth that called his name. So we feel like, was he getting a little delayed infection? And if so, why was it delayed? Why would he be the only one who only experienced it many, many moons later? I don't know. Could it be a psychological thing? I don't know. You tell me. So maybe he's wormy. Maybe he's not wormy. I don't know. So this book, you know, I like the concept of it. Yeah, I would say after the pandemic, stuff like this, it hits closer to home because you can imagine this like horrible, crazy thing spreading that you never thought would be a thing. Then the world shuts down. You know, military no-no. What are they doing? Don't be making lab monster worms. Don't do that. This book was good. It was easy. I mean, no, like the animal cruelty was not easy and it was gross. So like when I was eating and reading it, not the best, but I say that about so many books on this channel. It was a good book. I don't know. Honestly, I don't recommend it that much. Like if you want to, you could. Of all the books in the world that you could read, this one is just not a standout one. It was like, okay, cool. But like, it wasn't like, you know how when you're reading a book and you're like, you just can't wait to find out what happens, or there's like a piece of information that you are so curious about and can't wait to get. You kind of just felt like you're going along for the ride and like whatever happens, but there was nothing that was going to happen where you're like, oh my gosh, what a crazy ending. Like it just all was just kind of gross. And you didn't really care which boy lived. Like, you know, maybe someone lives, but like, do we care that much? I don't know. I didn't feel that invested in them. I also thought it was kind of funny that the personality-less boy is the one who survived the whole ordeal. That was an interesting choice. If I could go back in time and spend my time reading a different book, I think I would. So if you want a tapeworm book, then read this book. This one is for you, but otherwise, I think you'll be okay if you pass on it. So I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye-bye.